Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Chris Bai. We're going to talk about display technology in this part, so stay tuned. This is ArtIsRight. So this is part 2 of the conversation with Dr. Chris Bai, or as I just know him, Chris. If you haven't watched our first part yet, where we talk about future of color gamut and display P3 sRGB, where things are going, it also infused a lot of conversation about Adobe RGB as well. I recommend that you check that video out first. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. However, if you missed the first part and you're just jumping into the discussion about display technology right now, I want to give a welcome and also a quick introduction of Chris Bai. He is the person who runs the color lab at BenQ. He is BenQ Senior Color Expert. He also sits on the ICC International Color Consortium on the display board. Actually, he's a vice chair, so he defines and have a lot of voice in the standard of display technology, which is really awesome, right? So I think that's really great. And he is definitely the genius at BenQ. And this is something that I always say in all of my videos that I do with Chris, is that other companies may have good displays, may have somewhat decent software, questionable, but what they don't have is Chris Bai. And that's the main reason why I have been BenQ ambassador for all this time. Now, before we go on to these conversations, I want to share with you a disclaimer and a note that these are general conversations, blue sky discussion about future of technology, trends and everything. And many of these trends may or may not happen. It's just where we see the industry going right now. And the discussion we're about to have here does not represent BenQ future plans or any products or any features or anything like that at all. This is pretty much a general conversation that is not BenQ specific in any way. It's just the industry-wide trend. So I want to be absolutely clear about that before we go forward. So for this discussion, we are going to talk about display technology. Particularly, what I want to focus on is at the consumer level for pro display. These would be, for example, BenQ SW display line, hardware calibrated display for photographers, BenQ PD line, or any other displays for pro out there that are not necessarily the $40,000, $50,000 master displays or the super high end out there that are really designed for like Hollywood workflow. I really want to talk about like consumer pro displays, if there is such a thing, and there is. Anyway, so anyhow, one of the things that we will notice in the trends that we have been using LCD technology for quite some time now. I would probably argue like close to about 2 decades at this point, or a decade and a half or so. And the technology so far that we have in our display is IPS-LED backlight. For example, BenQ SW and PD line, right? Or IPS-LED backlight. And that tends to be the good technology. And for the longest time, it was the premier technology that we see in pro displays on the consumer level. Yes. And it still is today, but there are some emerging technology. And actually, even though I say emerging, they're already here. 2 of them that comes to mind are MiniLED, which are, I would say, a lot newer, a lot fresher, in the vocabulary of display discussion. And there's OLED display, which has been around for, I would say, a little bit longer than MiniLED, right? Yes. So what we're going to do is really kind of just focus our conversation on MiniLED first. So the thing that I see in MiniLEDs is that beside Apple, there's not a lot of Mini-LED displays out there as the standalone displays or even just ones in laptop. And yes, there are for PC manufacturers, but those sit at the very high end. They generally carry a premium price. And even the desktop one, right? On a display like this, we also see Mini-LEDs as well, but there's a compromise that every company makes. So Apple, you have the high-end Pro Display XDR. That is the one that, definitely costs a premium, but they don't really cut any corners on how many zones or backlight they have. And just to give us a quick background, so Mini-LEDs, what they do is instead of just having, for instance, just LED backlight that lights the entire panel through a diffusion layer. It sounds about right. I'm not sure am I describing this technology. I understand it, but verbalizing it is hard. So what Mini-LED does is that it literally, instead of having that one big diffusion panel, there are little LED zones that cluster up a group of pixels together. Yeah. And you can turn those zones on and off individually and have different varying controls. So what you can do is turn off a zone entirely and have total black. Yes. So you have this really amazing black. And in general, with Mini LED too, what you can do is really ramp up the brightness up super high, so you get these HDR display that are generally the true 1000 nits.
Exactly.
So those are some of the cool technologies. But a lot of times what I see, especially with external displays, and we talk about Apple already, but there are other brands out there that are doing this, and it falls into a trend between the higher, more premium models that are priced close to Apple but have less features, or one that costs half or even less than that but have way less zones and generally compromise in terms of just the benefit of having Mini LED altogether. So I thought this was like a good discussion to talk about like where we think this Mini LED technology is going. And just a side note as well, on Apple and 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, those are Mini LED displays. And I just showed Chris earlier today the HDR photography with Adobe Camera Raw 15. In fact, it's 15.1 at this point of this filming. And what's your thoughts about that? Just to quickly talk about the HDR preview.
It's amazing, mind-blowing. It's just like you're being actual scene over there. It's just like what you see is what you get.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would argue in some scenes, for example, like this shot, I was showing him when we were there, it doesn't pop out this much. But what I was able to like show on the screen makes it even better than being there in person in some ways, because the stars and everything just pop out. And at night, it's really hard to see, but being able to see that preview was amazing. But we're getting sidetracked here. So the other one I want to mention as well is that Apple iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch one with the M1 and also the M2 chip generation, those also have Mini LED displays as well on the inside. So it's becoming more prolific, and I think that Apple was able to bring this technology to the mainstream much easier than other manufacturers, much easier than other, I would say, like, you know, PC laptop manufacturers in that regard. So I think the main question here is that I'm wondering, where do you see Mini LED backlight technology going? Will we see this more in pro displays with this backlight tech, or will this be more of like a niche product for just a selective group of creative, you know, the way how it is now? Do you think that's, where do you see this trend going with this display tech?
Right. I think many experts, including me, we've seen this Mini LED backlight technology as an alternative to OLED technology. So it's a very good trend coming out. But I think that one thing that prohibits that everybody using this technology is still the price point, because the price point is still high. So I think for right now, the application will still be limited to the pro displays. So it's not like mainstream products will be using this Mini LED like really comfortable.
You don't really see Mini LED replacing IPS or IPS technology LED backlight anytime soon, where you know the price point is going to come down enough where this becomes a standard.
No, not in 5 years' time, I think.
Okay. That's a very interesting insight there, because what he mentioned, and one of the things we talked about just briefly earlier, is the fact that Mini LEDs, computers, or any type of displays with Mini LED generally comes at a premium, and we do see that. If you want the really good one without compromise, you're really paying a lot of money to get that functionality, that feature in the display. So we talked about this already, but let's say like in the very far future, do you think that the Mini LED display technology, this backlight, do you think it's going to end up becoming the standard to replace the current LED backlight at all? Or is this more of like a concurrent product that's going to be offered to these selective group or niche products as we have it now?
Well, I don't think Mini LED will replace any technology, current LCD technology right now, because there are so many different backlight technology for LCD. For example, the white LED backlight, the quantum dots or KSF technology. So each of these technology will have their own like advantage or like their shortcomings. So I think they each have their own like applications. So I think they have their own like applications out there. So I don't think a Mini LED will completely replace all of these technology at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. We might see that from Apple though. Just on a side note. But that's just really looking forward into these technologies. But even though I said that we may see that from Apple, I still, for instance, with the MacBook Air M2, we still don't see, or even just the MacBook Pro M2, Apple is still not putting the mini LED inside those laptops, because there's also power consumption,
Right.
Another factor as well, and also the heat generated from the display. I mean, the chassis was super small. There's really no way to adequately dissipate that heat, and also that battery is pretty much going to like die in no time on a MacBook Air. You're not going to be able to get the long lifetime out of it. So I thought this was an interesting discussion on that. Let's shift gear a little bit more and talk about OLED technology. It's something that we have been hearing for a very long time. We have seen in the displays, and I think we've gotten to the point where the price point of OLED have come down enough where it's not just this unicorn product that only select a few at the very high end that has, that has a lot of disposable income can purchase, that anyone can now get into great quality picture of an OLED. And just to clarify, an OLED, organic LED display, is different from mini LED. So rather than clumping up the backlight into various zones, with OLED technology, each individual pixels have an organic dye inside, right? That when electrons hit, or electricity hits it, it excites up. But each individual can turn on and off individually, which gives an even better, I would say, like image quality than mini LED in general. Because what you don't get is something that's called blooming. That's something that we get with mini LED, because you can only turn off and on the zones, and each zones covers so many pixels. It's not individual pixel themselves. And there's some side effect of mini LED, which we'll talk about in just a moment too. But one of the things I want to point out about OLED display is that for the longest time, we have seen OLED in TVs, and we have also seen OLED in, I would say, like still higher end laptops from PC, but not quite as, I don't think like they're priced quite as high as mini LED ones. I think it's much more reasonably priced. But only recently, we have seen OLED display come to just external like desktop displays. We haven't seen that technology emerge at all, which I think is something that shows a good change in the industry. Is probably telling us that, or signaling to us that the technology is maturing. And in fact, BenQ just released their first OLED panel, and I want to give a little plug here because I've been testing that panel, and I'll have a review out on this soon. And that is the Mobius EX480UZ. That is a 48-inch 4K display that is OLED from BenQ, 120 Hz. I mean, it's a fun gaming monitor with a really cool design. And it's super heavy. It's a beast, but I love that display. And my display went off. So when we look at OLED display from a pro consumer perspective, where do you see OLED technology going forward? Is this going to be, again, very similar to mini LED, where this is more of like a niche for some creative segments, or you think we're going to see more displays, and it would say like in the 27, 32 inch with OLED technology? Because right now there's some that are starting to come out, but there's not that many yet. There's only probably like a good handful of them.
Right. I think in the past, we don't see a lot of like large OLED panel size coming out, because it's the manufacturing process that prohibits that we have that large size. But right now, the process improved, so we can have this like 48-inch, 32-inch, or even larger size coming out without the pixel defect. So I guess in the future that we can see more of these desktop application or desktop products coming out in the future. But my guess, or my educated guess, is still like will be limited to pro products,
okay,
rather than the mainstream products, because the price point and its application, because it is still like into their more saturated color, more the high contrast area, which it is more into like a mastering.
More for video work.
Yeah,
okay.
Video work, or more for professional applications.
Do you see OLED becoming to like more pro displays? Is that going to be more prolific, or just like a very selective few in a model lineup? Will this become like one of those common things that we see with OLED display, more of them, and just with a lot of options? Or just, for example, right now, I'll give an example. For instance, a lot of the pro display lineup have one uniform backlight, IPS, and some of the other companies are adding different technologies. But do you ever think we'll ever see the day where it's like there's multiple models of OLED, or the entire lineup for Pro being OLED? I'm just wondering. I'm just throwing it out there.
This really depends on like what the panel manufacturer is offering, because Manufacturing OLED has an entire different manufacturing process than the rest of the LCD like panels. So they have to set up different manufacturing lines for that. So it really depends on the demands and also depends on like what's the market needs for this. So in my thinking is like in the near future, like in 5 years time, they probably won't have like, as you said, like a whole product line of OLED, but maybe a few flagship models that being OLED, that's foreseeable.
Got it. All right. So in talking about OLED a little bit, I want to talk about one other backlight technology as well. And in fact, it's not really a backlight. It's actually the entire pixel being lit up by itself. And this is referring to micro LED technology. And this is something that at one point in time we hear a lot of, that the micro LED is going to be the next step. Like after mini LED, and it's going to be something that ends up, being better than OLED because there's none of that organic compound. The life is going to last longer. All these other things, but for displays, for the consumer pro displays, or any displays, for example, in the 24 to I would say 32, 38 inch range, we don't hear the conversation happening as much anymore about micro LED. What insight can you give us on that?
Right. For micro LED, I think we have to understand this is there's no, we call diffusion layer between the LED and our human eyes. So it's like direct light from LED to our human vision system. So it's bright. It's very bright. Okay. So it can happen. It can give you very saturated colors. Okay, that's for sure. But the thing is, it's too bright. If you for desktop application, if you put it in front of over, I think an arm's length, right? That would be overly bright for your.
So about 3 feet normal viewing distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very, very bright. So I don't think that's a good application for desktop.
Okay.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is one pixel is made out from a set of micro LEDs, right? So that's RGB, 3 LEDs in there. So it's very hard to make that small. Miniaturizing, right? So if you put that in the desktop application, your pixel size will be very large. So you don't see a very fine details of your images.
Got it.
So the only application right now we'll see is signage.
Okay.
So large viewing size signage. So that would be a good application, for example, in the shopping mall. You require attention, right? So bright, saturated image. So that would be, which is far away from the crowd. So that would be a good attraction. That's the usage right now. But there are some drawbacks for the micro LED. For example, one is the halo effect. So if you walk around and stare at it, you will find the color shifting, or you'll find sometimes you find flickering as well. Some people will find uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one drawback. Another drawback is the walls are made of the panels.
And this is when you're referring to not just signage, but a whole entire wall made out of these micro LEDs.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen one before, these are pretty much panel with multiple micro LEDs with individual controllers. And usually what they do is they string them together. The big company that makes those that I've seen personally are Sony. And I know Chris mentioned that Samsung also makes that as well. And you've actually seen one in Asia, right?
In China, actually.
In China, okay. I've seen one in one of the studios in LA where they have that showing, and we got the chance to walk backstage, and it was actually quite intriguing because each one of them have their own controller. And the other thing that we haven't really touched on yet is heat.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be warm.
Yeah. So that's the other thing too. Miniaturizing technology is one of those things that it's easy when you do something larger, but when you really try to bring it down, it becomes more difficult. And when you really think about this, for example, a 27-inch, just a 4K, not even a 5K, we're looking at 163 pixels per inch. That's 163 little dots.
Yeah.
that's really small right now. When you really push over to like 5K, we're looking at something that's over 200 pixels per inch, and being able to like miniaturize that technology so that it's really that tiny. Well, it's not something that we have really mastered yet in display technology. And even, I think, even if we could do that, let's talk about one thing first, price. It's going to be at a premium.
Yeah, how much material costs, right?
Right.
Of that.
I mean, it's already as a premium now as it is, and as we start to see with Mini-LED is still at a premium right now. Even though technology has been out for a while, there's many more manufacturers using it, but all those displays are still sitting at the very top of the food chain.
Yeah.
So
actually, I've seen one of these applications, the micro LED walls, used as a cinema, a theater.
Oh, wow.
So they're playing movies, and you can actually having dinner at the movie theaters because they don't have to turn off the lights, because those micro LED walls are so bright.
Right.
So they can play the movies out there, and then you can have dinner, and there's no it's good application.
You don't have to worry about light polluting or like making a color that's contrasty.
No.
Yeah, so that's also another really good point that he had made there about that technology. But again, it's still for a larger venue, not necessarily for general consumption. Because if you use a projector before, a lot of times, I mean, and projector technology have gotten really good. In fact, I'll also say that I've recently purchased on my own a few BenQ projectors to use in various setup for like presentation for different companies. I help my clients set them up. And it's pretty amazing how bright those projectors are. Even in a light like this going on, you can still see color very nicely. And I was impressed by the technology that it can be, that it can be used. But a lot of times, if you really take a brighter light, sometimes you do lose that contrast. And that's where I think you were saying the application of micro LED would come in.
Yes.
Got it. So, well, with this in mind, I have a feeling that what you're really telling me right now is that the future of display tech is not just one backlight technology, not something that's going to like totally in the pro consumer segment. It's going to be like replacing IPS-LED backlight. There's going to be some other technology that comes around, and I think a lot of these technology will continue to exist in concurrent with each other and develop in parallel product lines.
Like I said before, each of these technology have their own applications out there. These applications will still exist, right? So these technology will still serve for that application.
Got it.
They will coexist.
Right. So I think we're also getting into an age where, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I've talked about different Apple silicon chip, how they're really targeted for each consumer segment. As photographer, the Pro is fine. If you do videos, you get the Max or the Ultra, just because you have double that rendering engine, and there's no longer one size fit all, so you got to really configure the machine to what you need. We start to see that in the display world already. For example, we have displays that have super high refresh rate in like 360 hertz or something like that. That's for esport. We have the entertainment display that are usually anywhere between 120 to 160 hertz or something like that. Then we have the Pro displays that are supposed to be super color accurate, IPS-LED backlight. We start to see the emerging of Mini-LED tech, OLED as a standalone display. But these are going to be one of those things where in the future, we're not just going to have one technology or just two. We're still going to have these varieties. But now what it really comes down to at the end of the day is picking the right display for the application and the type of creative work that you do. Picking the display that best matches with your creative workflow. And that's something that I have been emphasizing, and I think we're going to see more of that happening. I would probably say like even in the next 5 years.
Oh yeah.
As technologies start to emerge. So again, there's no longer one size fit all where you get a display and you expect to do everything. You really have to think about the primary creative task that you're going to use that display in and choose the display based on that.
Exactly.
So again, interesting future that we're having here. Any other wrap-up thoughts about like future of display text or anything where you see us going?
I think one technology that we can talk about is the new IPS black technology.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been an interesting topic that being discussed lately. So IPS black is actually IPS technology was emphasized on having a darker, like a deeper black.
More contrast.
More contrast. And less backlight bleed. So basically,
which is one of the side effects
of the IPS.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So basically, that's an improvement over by some panel manufacturers. So basically, we're hoping that these panel manufacturers can maybe make that available to all the display manufacturers.
Yeah. Yeah, so in general, when a new technology gets developed, a lot of times it is done by one company. For example, BenQ have the exclusive right now on SW321C, the extreme matte coating they have on the panel. And if you haven't seen that, you gotta just see it in person. It's just astonishing. But a lot of times, manufacturer will come together, 2 or 3 companies, they'll actually sign a pact, they'll co-develop this. And the thing is that in that agreement, they'll say that we can only supply the panels to our partners for a duration of time until that agreement is, is over and is done with. The other manufacturers can't really get access to that technology. So a lot of times, the hurdle itself just comes from these consortium, these alliance that the companies put together. And it's really hard to say when those things are going to be over, because a lot of these, contract, I would say, happen in a secure room, a lot of NDAs being signed and everything. Anyway, it's interesting that you brought up IPS Black, because that's one thing that a lot of viewers on our channel has been asking about, like, what about this technology? Because they've been hearing some benefit. But the one thing I'll also say right now is that I have yet to see an IPS Black technology used in a pro hardware calibrated panel. I haven't seen anything like that yet. What we may see is IPS Black starting to come out in, I would say, either more like just consumer, generic use display, or a lot of times we'll see in software calibrated display that may dabble in the pro segment a little bit, but not really designed for pro. So I've been seeing a lot more of that technology happening in that area, but we haven't seen any company to really come out with pro hardware calibrated display with IPS Black yet. I could be wrong, but so far in, just knee deep in this technology and just following these companies, I haven't seen it as such. Wow, this has been a really cool discussion in the future of display tech. I really like this.
Yeah, same here.
So I hope you guys find this helpful too. Thank you so much, Chris, for visiting the studio, answering all these questions that are just, talking about just like the future of display tech. And I hope you find this information insightful. Again, thank you for being here. I appreciate you visiting the studio. I love to welcome you here. And if you want to come back anytime in the future, you let me know. Yeah. We'll definitely welcome you back again for more questions, Q&A like this.
I would love to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as usual, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Give this video a like, subscribe, and hit on the bell to renew, and not request.